Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's VIN-dow with Robert Hollinshead. Good afternoon, Bob.
Top of the afternoon to you, Sean, and whoever else that would waste your time listening.
let's be some old codgers and talk about kids these days.
Yeah.
Actually, you can talk about kids these days. I'll listen.
Really? Grandkids or regular kids? Yeah. Okay. So something hit me the other day. It's pretty comical because when you listen to the pontificators talking about what things are going to be, and they got crystal balls about how things are and why they are the way today. Looking in the rearview mirror, it's pretty easy to tell us all about what's happening, what's going to happen, and so forth. And I'm looking at at a chart. It's interesting, how there's going to be pressure on the used car pricing going into 2138 to 2025, you follow me? Not that it means anything to somebody that's buying and selling cars today or tomorrow, and why in some sectors of this market you're seeing prices evaporate, interest in cars evaporating. For the past 3 years they've been held up. Somebody could even have the insanity of talking about what MSRP is when you're talking about a used car. That's the first time in my 50 years that anybody even would be silly enough to bring that topic up when you're talking about what a car is, what you'd pay, how much we're going to price it in a book for, et cetera, right? So now it's become part of the normal vernacular where somebody's bringing up the idea that what the MSRP is like, it has some relevance. And that is definitely going to disappear in the near future because it becomes irrelevant. You drive past the Lincoln dealer's lot, they're simply packed full of cars, all the wrong cars because they're building the wrong cars. They're building very expensive cars, and people that can't afford an expensive car is relegated to buy something different, and that's not in stock. And the whole circular thing that's going on, the pandemic has set a lot of different things into motion that don't make sense if you landed here from Mars and asked the question, well, what's going on here? This don't make sense, right? But when we're looking at the pontification of what the market's going to be in 2023, 4, 5, right? And we're looking at why it's going to be that way. There's no lease cars. It's going to keep the price up. And I'm sitting at the table with folks, people, relatives, whatever, that, they're just number one at the graduating class of something in business school of something. The other one's a doctor, an engineer, the other's and looking at all their friends, 9 million friends all walking around, right? And I'm putting things into perspective. First of all, they're 33 years old. Nobody's even thinking about having kids or getting married and so forth. So there's never going to be a wood grain wagon again. That's never going to happen because that is over. That whole fantasy of the way anybody in previous generations lived is no longer there. So the changing demand for cars it's weird. But more importantly, and when you stop and think about it, this is what really is insane. I'm an old guy. I understand that. But the day we turn 16, if you didn't borrow somebody's car to go get your driver's license, because obviously you didn't have a car because your father didn't have a car. We had a driver's license, though. I would love to have a car. You just didn't make enough money to buy a car. In other words, if you didn't have your driver's license the day you turned 16, that was actually justifiable suicide, right? And I'm sitting and listening and watching and observing the graduating class of XYZ Graduate School of Business, one of the best in the country. I'll bet you if you took the census inside that group, and they're 23, 28, 37-year-olds, they ain't got their driver's license, nor do they care to get one. Now, when you put that in perspective, that could be the biggest demographic shift of what is going to have an impact on the desire for a used car, even though there isn't any. Like, you got to have a demand, so the supply is challenged. But that's okay. If you don't have any demand for it, who cares? It ain't going to change the valuations. Whenever there's supply and demand, there's no supply, it's going to make price higher. But you got to have the demand in order to create a move in valuations. I got a funny feeling that, and you never see that topic brought up unless we legalize all illegal aliens, then we'd have another 7 or 8, 10, 15, 20 million people. All are going to be driving because they all go to work and they all would love to drive legally for a first time, right? assuming that's not going to happen, right? Where is this demand going to come from? From like the entire generation of people that at 22, if they don't have a license, they got 12 tattoos, but they don't have a driver's license. Where in the world is that going to come from? If the borders are closed and we don't have anybody wanting to drive. My feeling is there's going to be a dramatic shift in the demand for cars, and therefore the fact that, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't personally see any shortage of cars at the moment. If anything, it's the opposite, because when you get to the auction, you got 743 cars there. Even though there is, for the day, 1,252 people logged in, the desperation to buy those cars, no matter what the price is. We set them babies in. If it's worth 80 grand, I'll set it in for 20. I don't care. I'm going to see what the price is, right? The amount of people that are actually desperate to buy cars is gone. It's not anything remotely close to what these past 3 years have been. And I'm including, January, February, March of this year. It was wild. Nobody could explain it, how the prices were so crazy. And to me, it always felt like this is a fugazi. This ain't real. This is not real, because people are getting new cars. They're not desperate for cars like they have been for the past 2.5 years prior to that. And I don't really see, when, we're buying Mercedes from Mercedes dealers, Lexus from Lexus dealers, Chevy from Chevy dealers. So it's not as if they don't have their own product and they, they're desperate to keep whatever they are trading or whatever, wherever the source is. It's not the case. And this is a very clear indicator, because we don't buy our cars at auctions. We buy them from the primary sources, people that are actually trading the cars in from dealers that would love to have our money the second the car is traded, where we give them a check instantaneously so they can go pay off the car with our money. That's our source. And so we really are I would call it the entry level of inventory, and you take one step back, you can actually see why they're coming in, where they're coming from, and what the demand of those cars are in the secondary marketplace. And to me, I feel that we're, almost all the way back to 2019. In other words, prior to the world going on its ear with the pandemic. What that's going to do, I think, is rely on the skill set that we have developed over your lifetime, if you're an automotive professional, to actually revert back the way we used to do business. And then it's a question of, traffic and finance and all the rest of the things that are the ingredients necessary to make a car deal. And what I'm really seeing, I think, is part of this confounded or constipated kind of little thing we're going through at the moment is, again, I'm listening to the conversation. I went to 3 graduations in the past, 3 weeks or something. And not that I'm sitting there aggravating them with the questions, because then you're the ostrich, right? But these folks don't drive, don't care to drive, couldn't care less about a car. And it's when I reflect on my experience as a human, not just myself, but my kids also, it's completely, utterly different. It's just not remotely similar to what it's been in the past. That to me means that, and this is not something that we're, well, what do we do to change that, Bob? Well, that ain't going to happen, because I think it's a attitudinal shift in the way, we put helmets on kids. We don't let them drive, climb trees. They have to have, lessons to do everything and tutors to do something else, because nobody's outside playing ball in the street and having a fist fight over something. That's just not the way this works any longer. So a 30-year-old is perfectly fine with his mother driving him to work and picking him up after work and making sure everything is copacetic at work. Otherwise, he's allowed to quit and doesn't have to ever make a living. It's weird and it's odd, but it's happening enough that it's not an anomaly. To me, it's a shift in the behavior of people that are alive and breathing and functioning. So maybe functioning, maybe not in our world. Does any of that make sense to you, Sean, or it's just an old fart like babbling things? I know for a fact the demand is affected by the fact there's fewer drivers, and that's statistically, when you Google that stuff, it's shocking. People 25 and under, 63% don't care about driving. I can promise you one thing: in 1969, 99.99994% not only cared about driving, even though they didn't have the money for a car, they had their driver's license within the same week, let's say, for sure, of turning 16. It just isn't. It's no longer happening. Do you sense that?
Uh-huh. Oh, absolutely. And if you step back and look at it, like if you think about the journey of what cars people own, you're always in entry level in university or just after, and as you start, building your net worth, you keep going up into finally maybe a luxury car if you're lucky enough or whatever. And so you could almost say be bearish on luxury brands going forward if there's nobody to drive even the entry level cars to get to the luxury cars.
Well, then you add to that, Sean, the fact that people got welded into cars. I mean, let's be realistic. Car dealers had the best 3 years in the history of the car business, typically by a multiple of 2 to 10, right? So a dealership that was making 10 now made 13, made a million now made 13 for the year, or put your multiple on it, whatever you'd like, right? I don't believe is normal, right? And I think I don't picture that actually going to ever happen again. If it did, it would be very weird. I think the world will come to an end before it happens. But what it's done is it's put us in a weird situation. And obviously the manufacturers see what's getting sold, what people are paying for them. They keep raising the prices and talking about chips. Then that's the reason why and so forth. But obviously they're making 5 or 8, 10 times more money selling a $100,000 Suburban or Expedition than they ever did selling a Focus. So, cars that are affordable for people to buy a new car, let alone ever dreaming of leasing a car in the future, right? Are not there. But what you wind up with is all of these staple cars, like the normal cars, are just not bringing the money that they've been bringing. And I think it has a lot to do with dealers now have inventory. They're desperate to sell the cars. I mean, stop and think about it. Talking to dealers all day long. Everybody's ready to discount anything. I mean, and of course, in public, they would never admit to it. You follow me? They would never be the one to say, "I'll discount a car to put it over the curb to put the scratch on the chalkboard." But it's total and absolute bullshit if anybody believes that. So we'll be right back to whoredom shortly, and we're already whoredom with a lot of these high-priced SUVs and trucks and so forth that everybody got used to selling over MSRP. Now those people are welded into them babies, where when they come back in for another, you're going to have to do some magic discount, whether they know they're getting a discount or not. You want to put them in another new one that's sitting outside. You definitely going to do the discount form to show them what their monthly payment's going to be. You see what I'm saying to you? So, and that also then puts the pressure on. Well, I think I'll go to the auction today, boss, and buy about $15,000 or $20,000 pickup trucks to bring them back and sit them next to the new ones we can't sell. Nah, that ain't happening. And the way we see it in the market generally, the wholesale market generally, obviously has nothing to do with a 30-year-old not having his driver's license. But I think ultimately, when we talk about what's going to happen in the end of this year and the beginning of next year and some other year, where we're showing the chart of what the availability is going to be, you got to include the rest of the information. If you're talking about demand, you got to talk about supply. You also have to take in consideration. Somebody's got to do that sociological demographic study to figure out, well, there ain't going to be no demand because there ain't no drivers. You follow me? That's what it seems like to me anyway. It's kind of comical that topic isn't brought up when we're talking about supply. Who cares about the supply? You got to have demand to make it mean something.